Disclaimer. The following content is entirely fictional and does not represent real events or people. This material has been edited and adapted from the channel Beyond the Page. So Bella, see your taste in food hasn't changed after all this time? Edward asked. Always. I replied. What is it with you and your mushroom ravioli? He chuckled, giving me his famous crooked grin that made my insides melt. Stop dazzling me. I whined pitifully. I'm sorry, I forgot. Edward apologized smugly, sounding the least bit sincere. He had found it funny that we had been served by the same waitress as last time, who obviously recognized Edward and didn't mask the look of surprise when she saw me. Of course, this didn't stop her from pulling up her skirt and pushing down her top. Her flirting with my imprint had annoyed me to no end, but after a bit of reassurance that Edward wasn't going to run off with her, I calmed down. I knew I was being unreasonable, but it was instinctual. I was possessive when it came to my imprint and what I deemed mine. What are you thinking? Edward asked, taking my hand in his and laying it on the table, drawing me from my thoughts. I looked up at him in slight confusion. Not that I was against the small display of affection, but I didn't really know where we stood. He nodded his head to my left, making my eyes dart in the direction, and I was pleased when I saw the waitress finally showing a small sign of defeat. Here's your food, she said rudely. And are you sure there isn't anything I can get you? She asked Edward, not bothering to hide the double meaning in her words. I couldn't help the slight growl that tumbled from my chest as my lips curled back over my teeth. Edward's grip on my hand tightened slightly as the waitress shot me an alarmed look. I let out a small huff of annoyance before fake coughing a few times. No thank you, but maybe a glass of water for my fiancé here, Edward said politely, making me choke further on the piece of ravioli I had just put in my mouth in an attempt to keep my less than polite words to myself. At last, all signs of hope died from the waitress' eyes as she turned around and slunk back to the kitchen. Bella, are you okay? Edward asked worriedly. I'm good, just wasn't expecting you'd go to such far measures to get her to leave you alone, I said sheepishly, feeling a blush cover my face. Well, I'm looking forward to the day when I'll be able to say that you are truly my wife, he said, kissing the back of my hand, making me blush further. There's your infamous Bella blush, he chuckled, looking fondly into my eyes as I continued to slowly eat my ravioli while losing myself into my thoughts. If only the waitress knew we weren't any ordinary customers. No, we were a vampire, shape-shifter couple, sworn enemies bound by fate. Fate, the messed up thing. Hell, I wasn't even a normal shifter. Even in my abnormally I still had to be different. I could shift into any animal, including a phoenix, which has to be one of the most stereotypical things ever. I mean, obviously, of all people I just had to be the one who could shift into the animal thought to be extinct. I felt like one of those girls from a cheesy American program. On top of being able to shift into anything, I still had to tell the Cullens of my other abilities, the part I'm sure they would be more apprehensive about. My ability to control fire. Bella, are you ready to go, love? What? I asked, snapping out of my inner monologue. I said, are you ready to go? I paid 10 minutes ago, Edward chuckled. Oh, sure, let's go. I haven't really spoken to anyone other than Alice and Rosalie yet, I said, blushing as I realized how stupid I must have looked just sitting there. I know Esme's just buzzing to reconnect with you, Edward said softly. And Bella. Yes? I replied, sensing the uncertainty in his voice. What are we? He stammered as we walked out the door into the cold night's air. We've just began a relationship. I'm your girlfriend, I clarified after a moment's thought. Yes, that's right. You're mine, he said, pulling me to a stop, before gently kissing my lips. Yours, I confirmed. It had been 3 days since my date with Edward, and I was starting to fall back into my old routine with his family. Edward would pick me up in the mornings for school and drop me back home afterwards, if I wasn't going to his house after school, that was. The Cullens' sudden return to Forks had sparked a bunch of rumors which I had to deny to pretty much the whole population of Forks High. The school students weren't the only ones who were confused about the Cullens' sudden return. The pack were worried about the treaty. They saw me as one of their own, and so did the Cullens. So after countless hours of meetings between the pack and the Cullens, with me awkwardly standing in the middle, they decided to leave the treaty, as it was after I raised the fact that technically I wasn't part of their pack, and as much as Sam hated to accept it, it was true. I was currently sat in the Cullens' large living room doing my trig homework. I don't really understand the big fuss about triangles. We're never going to need to know any of this after we graduate. Edward and the rest of the Cullens were out hunting, as they said that some family friends were visiting tomorrow. Sighing, I gave up trying to figure out question 11 and made my way to the overfilled fridge. Esme had gone a bit over the top on her shopping trip, but I wasn't going to complain. The look of joy on her face was too much. I pulled a packet of mini sausages out the fridge, and was about to start eating them when I was interrupted by a feral growl. Gasping, I realized there was 5 other scents in this room. 5 vampires who I didn't know. Great. I quickly spun on the spot and took a step back to push myself against the work surface. I saw that there were 4 female vampires and 1 male in the coven that had seemingly appeared from nothing. Hi. I said cautiously. Who are you and what are you doing here? One of the blonde females hissed. Well, as you can see, I was about to eat something before I was so rudely interrupted, and Bella, I huffed, putting a mini sausage in my mouth. Well, Bella, would you mind explaining what you're doing here, as in at the Cullens' house? The man asked, straining my name in an odd way. I'm waiting for them to get back, was my simple reply as I picked up the pork sausages and made my way past them, to my pile of blankets which I had stolen from all the family's beds. By now I had finally realized these strange vampires were the Denalies. I should have guessed that immediately with the gold eyes and all. I just wasn't thinking. Edward had shown me a picture of them all and told me their names. I knew Carmen and Eliza were the coven leaders who were mated, and Tanya, Irina, and Kate were the 3 daughters. Edward had seemed a little uncomfortable talking about Tanya, and I hadn't missed the smirks on his siblings' faces as he struggled uncomfortably trying to explain her to me. In the end, I gathered Tanya had a slight crush on Edward, and after asking Alice and Rose, I found out it went a bit deeper. Flashback. So who are these Denali people? Edward seemed pretty worried when Carlisle mentioned they were visiting. I asked Rosalie and Alice as they put me through another round of Bella Barbie. The Denalies. There are Consons of sorts. Their leader, Eliza, is an old friend of Carlisle's, and they share our diet. We haven't seen them in a while as, well, one of them, Tanya, has a major crush on Edward and he can only avoid her so much, Alice explained. Excuse me, what now? I screamed, furious that I was only now being told that another woman had eyes for my imprint. Relax, Bella. Relax. The feelings are totally one-sided. Edward treats Tanya like the plague, Rosalie said, rubbing my arm soothingly. I was still trying to get used to Rosalie being nice to me. After the Cullens' return, she had come to me and stated it was too much effort trying to stay mad at me all the time for no reason. I wasn't going to complain, I just needed time to get used to it. End of flashback. I would offer you a drink, but I don't think I have anything to satisfy your taste, I said with a slight smirk. I'm sorry, but I still don't understand why you're here, Tanya asked rudely. I'm the Queen of Washington, I can go wherever I please, I exclaimed, throwing my hands in the air. Washington has a queen? Kate asked in confusion. I was being sarcastic, you idiot, I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose in a very Edward-like fashion. I am not an idiot, Kate growled, startling me. Kate, we don't know if she knows about us. Farmed hissed so low that no human would be able to hear. Well, she pretty much said she knew earlier. No drinks for our taste. And all, Irina butted in. Don't interrupt your mother, Irina. Eliza warned firmly. All off this hap so low and fast that they would have no idea I was listening in. It was funny really. Every second or so one of them would give me a quick glance to see if I was becoming suspicious. I'm sorry, but I mean seriously, how old are you? Everyone knows there isn't a Queen of Washington, I replied, sarcasm thick in my voice as I broke them from their mini argument. Well, then answer the question. What are you doing here? Irina yelled as they all nodded and got into crouches. Well, I guess since you asked so politely I might be right that it. Tanya screamed, interrupting me as she pounced at me, ignoring her yells from her coven. That's when everything went wrong. I let out a startled scream as Tanya came flying towards me. Instinctively, I brought my left forearm to shield my face as I clenched my eyes shut, not wanting to see my demise. Suddenly I heard a pained scream, causing my eyes to fly open. What I saw before me made me gasp in shock. Seriously, I had never meant for this to happen, yet it did. Tanya had activated one of my most primal instincts, one I had never meant to surface again. I was manipulating fire. Actually, saying that I'm not sure manipulating is the right word. To manipulate fire there has to be fire near by somewhere. I had made fire appear from nothing, and then manipulated that into a wall between me and the snarling vampires. As quickly as it came, it was gone, leaving nothing but a slight hint of smoke in the air which would quickly air out. New question, Irina spat. What are you? Just a normal girl, I said, though it came out sounding like a question. Well, I'm sure the Cullens are going to be delighted to hear your explanation on why you're in their home and what you are, Kate said, giving me a sarcastic smile. Girls, don't be rude, Carmen admonished lightly, making me roll my eyes. Suddenly, they all froze before smirks came across Tanya, Irina, and Kate's faces. I took another step away from them all, worried that I might have to make a last-minute dash away, but found myself trapped in the corner of the living room. I had absolutely no idea how I had managed to travel all the way over here, but I also didn't know how the sofa had been pushed to an odd angle. Two of the pillows burst or the mini sausages go flying around the floor either. Great, looks like the Cullens are about to arrive. Say your prayers, sunshine, Tanya spat. Sunshine? I asked, raising a brow showing how unimpressed I was. They really needed to get some better nicknames. Or insults. I couldn't tell which it was meant to be, but I didn't get the chance to ask before I suddenly heard the front door burst open as there was a flurry of action which resulted in me ending up behind Edward, crouching on the stairs. What the Lord's name is going on here? Carlyle exclaimed, rushing through the door just in time to see the Denali sisters jump into offensive crouches opposite his first son and newest daughter. Esme came rushing over to me and began fussing about me, sitting me in a more comfortable way on the stairs so I wasn't being half crushed by my snarling imprint. I noticed Jasper pull Alice closer to him as Emmett did the same with Rosalie. What is that? Tanya spat, jerking her head in my direction, making Edward hiss along with the entire Cullen family. I took a step closer to Edward, rubbing his back soothingly. I practically felt the tension melt out of him as he moved an arm behind him to pull me closer. She is Bella, our sister, Carlyle and Esme's daughter and Edward's mate, Jasper growled viciously, some of his southern twang seeping into his voice. What? Tanya screeched. You're all being controlled by that freak. Get it away, she's dangerous. She almost killed me. She's not your mantle, Eddie. I am, she wailed, making my eyes widen as she revealed the little mishap. How could Bella almost kill you? She's human. You're a vampire, Rosalie said in the tone she used to use when she rarely spoke to me. She made fire. Out of nothing, it came from her hands. She's not safe, Edward can see it, just look in our minds, Kate said, drawing the attention to herself. Yeah, and me, we all saw it, didn't we, Mum, Dad? She said, turning to Carmen and Eliza. Irina piped in. Well, I'm not sure what I saw, to be honest, Carmen said, rubbing her forehead. But it wasn't something a human should be able to do, Eliza finished. I felt Edward stiffen slightly under me and immediately panicked. A moment later I felt a false sense of calm wash over me and shot Jasper a look. I appreciated his efforts, but I was too worried to accept the false emotions. Slowly my fears became a reality. Edward slowly pulled away from me and crouched defensively in front of his family. What the hell, Bella? He spat, making my world come crashing down. What have I done? Son, what are you doing? Carlyle asked, a look of confusion on his face. I found myself watching Esme shift her weight uncomfortably from one foot to the other, an action I wouldn't give a second thought had I known she could stay in any one position for as long as she wanted and feel no discomfort. The tense atmosphere was almost stifling. She lied to us, Edward stuttered, breaking my heart a little more and finalizing my decision. If he couldn't even say my name, how could I stay here? It was simple, I couldn't. Without a second thought I leapt down the stairs, thanking the gods above I was only on the third on and miraculously managed to land on my feet, and dashed out the door before anyone could comprehend what was going on. The last thing they expected me to do was run. Oh well, being vampires and all, they should learn to expect the unexpected. They thought I was a weak, naive little girl still. They hadn't truly seen my new Bella 2 improvements, but Edward had seen a glimpse of my true self and his reaction wasn't good. I ran out the open door, past a baffled Emmett, shocked Rosalie, tearful Esme, worried Jasper, scared Alice, and an innocent-looking Carlyle. Oh, and let's not forget a snarling mate and a smug coven of Denalies, with only 2 people showing any sign of compassion in the room. As soon as I was out the front door, I leaped over the edge of the railing around the Cullens' large porch, shifting into my white wolf mid-air and landing on my 4 paws with a soft thud. I took one look back to see that everyone had yet to realize where I had gone before sprinting off into the densely packed mess of green and brown, better known as the woods. I dodged and swerved viciously to avoid trees, logs, and branches. Grief was clouding my senses and tears began to block my vision. I ignored my pain though and kept running, resulting in me running into a few low-hanging branches. I ignored the pain as I began to feel fatigue overtake me. I finally began slowing only to realize I had no idea where I was. I looked down and from what I could see my paws were black and red. Oh great, blood. As I became more aware, I realized how bad some of my injuries were. I began to stumble forward, realizing I could hear the sound of people about a mile or so west of where I was. It was dark and cold was beginning to seep into the night's air. No clouds were to be seen, allowing the moon and the stars to shine down, my only source of comfort. There was a full moon tonight. How typical. I'm a werewolf out on a full moon. Let's hope no one sees me. I began staggering forward, able to see light from what looked like a house within a couple of 100 meters. I shifted back, not wanting to give anyone a heart attack when I was the one who needed help. I was weaker and smaller in my human form, and walking used a lot more energy and was a lot more painful than before. Nevertheless, I carried on, ignoring my pain. My arms were bloodied, and there were multiple small, deep cuts on my arms, while my legs weren't in much of a better condition. My left leg had many painful, weeping scratches and cuts, but that wasn't what was causing me the most pain. On my right leg, going from my upper thigh to my knee, was a deep, angry cut. I knew if I ever made it out of this alive it was scar, badly. My clothes were torn and bloodied, something I hadn't known was possible until now, but I didn't care. I had finally reached my destination, and I could clearly hear people laughing and talking in the garden around a fire now. There seems to be at least 3 men and 2 women from what I could hear. I was glad that there were no children. Well, hopefully there weren't, at least. I didn't want to scare them. I finally broken through the tree line and saw the people before me. Help, I murmured weakly, collapsing to the damp, dirt floor, not caring that I would be filthy. I heard a collection gasps and a sudden commotion as people rushed over. Jenny, Henry, call an ambulance. I heard a woman cry before dark spots invaded my vision before totally sucking me under. I was cold, ever so cold, shivering against my thin jacket and running leggings. I cursed myself for the bad choice of clothing. Alaska was generally known for its cold weather, much like Forks. Forks, what a funny name. Who would name a place after a piece of cutlery? Is there a knives and spoons out there somewhere as well? Can you imagine living in a place called Spoons? I decided to walk up the large, snowy mountain I had somehow appeared on. Wait. Wow, did I get here? I don't remember ever leaving to go to Alaska. Oh well. Oh, look. I'm at the top of the mountain now. Wow, it's so beautiful. The other mountain looks like it will be fun to climb, but it's so far away and I'll have to climb down this one and then up that one. Maybe I can climb one of those trees instead, but I don't really want to have to do that. I might get a splinter. Hey. Why isn't it cold anymore? It's actually quite hot now. Wow, hot, really really hot. I'm in the desert. I'm in the desert now. How did this happen? Oh, I remember. I walked here to Egypt, that's it. I'm glad I did. The blistering heat is almost worth the view. The Great Pyramids are way bigger than I expected. Maybe they have some water in them. My throat's killing me. Water. Quick Bella, run, run. Why can't I run? My legs feel so weird. They're numb. Maybe it's the heat, which has gone, but what's that sound? Is that my alarm clock? Why have the pharaohs stolen my alarm? Mum can turn it off, right? Yeah. Beep, 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 beep. Ugh, Mum, turn off the alarm already. Sensing no one was going to turn off the alarm, I decided I would have to do it myself. I groaned lightly before snapping my eyes open as I hit something cold and hard, making a metallic sound. My eyes widened in shock as I took in my surroundings. I didn't know where I was, but I knew what I was in. A hospital. My old frenemy. What happened to Alaska? Egypt? Was it a dream? That's a weird and vivid dream. I had been in more than enough hospitals over the years to be able to recognize one immediately and had made a criteria list. Dreary, whitewashed walls, floors, and ceiling. Check. Strong smell of antibacterial cleanser? Check. Ugly curtains offering no privacy? Check. Uncomfortable, rock-hard beds with tiny covers? Check. And let's not forget about the trillion machines hooked up to people making a constant racket. Check. Check a million times check. I continued to observe the small room which I appeared to have to myself. In one corner I could see a toilet with one of those chairs on wheels on that they pushed patients too ill to walk in. It wasn't a wheelchair but very similar. Next to the toilet was a door which I guessed lead out onto the main part of the hospital ward. My bed was pushed up against one wall with a side table on either side of it, surprisingly littered with cards and chocolates. I slowly craned my neck to get a better view, wincing in pain but continuing anyway. All the cards were of different designs but had the same message on the front. Get well soon. My only question was, who were they from? Looking at the various machines hooked up to me, I found my alarm was in fact a heart rate machine. Realizing it was out of my reach and actually using my legs was out of the question since they still felt numb and I'm so lazy, I decided to rip off the armband. Looking down at my arms, I realized my right arm was in a white cast up to my elbow and my left had a bandage on which looked like it was securing a cannula which was currently pumping some kind of drug into me. I slowly moved my left hand to take off the heart monitor while trying not to pull on the giant needle in my arm. I knew the needle wasn't big, but it still grossed me out. I securely wrapped my fingers around the band on my arm before tugging it off, hearing the Velcro rip before the line went dead, making a painful, dull, continuous beeping sound. Not even 5 seconds later my room was being swarmed with doctors and nurses who all froze once they caught sight of me. God, I know I probably look awful, but they don't have to be so rude about it. I watched skeptically as they muttered to each other with wide eyes before someone rushed over and opened the curtains, allowing the bright sunlight to spill into the room. I hissed and pulled my hands up to shield myself from the light, chuckling humorlessly at the thought of how much I looked like one of those cliché vampires. The other nurses and doctors seemed to snap into action at this point as they all began whizzing around. I heard the heart monitor be turned off as I felt a tug on my arm, only to see a doctor unwrapping the bandage and gently removing the cannula before sticking a small plaster over the top. Another nurse gently pushed me back down to a lying position before placing a stethoscope on my chest for a minute while writing on a clipboard before scurrying off. A third nurse handed me a cup of water which I took with a shaky hand before she reached to my face. I recoiled instantly, confused. I reached to my face only to realize I was wearing an oxygen mask. How did I not notice that? I mean, they're not exactly small, are they? After hopelessly trying to get it off and failing, I allowed the nurse to take it off, giving her a small smile of thanks before I raised the cup to my lips and took a small sip. It felt foreign. The cold water going down my throat caused shivers to break out over my body, making the two remaining nurses look at me with cautious eyes. "Are you okay?" one of the nurses asked. She was a woman and looked to be in her late 30s. I opened my mouth to reply before shutting it and rolling my tongue a few times, willing myself to talk. "Yes, I'm fine, thank you. Just a bit cold," I admitted, stretching my shoulders while pulling up the thin blanket. "I sure hope your fever isn't coming back again," the male nurse said, walking up and placing his hand on my forehead. "What do you mean, fever?" "I don't have a fever, I'm just cold. Besides, fevers take weeks to recover from, not a couple of hours," I said, growing worried. I didn't know how my shift or healing would affect this. Could they tell I wasn't normal? "Honey," the female nurse said, an anxious expression painted on her face. "You've been in a coma for 4 months. What? How? Why?" 1,000 questions raced through my mind all at once. "What? Och, how? Why?" I stammered eventually. "Don't you remember?" the male nurse asked with slightly wide eyes before he began scribbling something down on the clipboard hooked to the end of my bed. "Remember what?" I asked, confused to what he meant. "You stumbled into some people's garden a couple miles away from here half dead. To be honest, we're not really sure how you survived." The female nurse supplied for me. "I remember that," I exclaimed, flapping my arms before wincing. "I just want to know how I was in a coma for 4 months. You were in the coma by the time you arrived here. We had to operate on you immediately and give you several blood transfusions. We're not entirely sure why you went into a coma, but once you were out of the operation your body temperature had dropped too much and we had to bury you in hot packs. That did, however, somehow cause you to get a fever also, but you're better now, right?" the male nurse said. "Yes, I'm fine, just tired really, and I'm curious, who are these cards from?" I asked. We traced your hospital record back to Forks. It wasn't hard to find, to be honest. It seems you're quite familiar with hospitals by your extensive record," the female nurse said, making me blush. "I'm Julia, by the way," she added. "Oh, sorry, how rude of us. I'm Mitchell," the other nurse said. "Bella, but I'm sure you already knew that." "Yes, we got that from your id. Here, I'll pass you the cards, and a girl called Alice told me to give you this," Julia said before producing a small envelope from her apron with my name written in Alice's elegant script on. "Thank you, I'll call if I need anything," I said, politely hinting for them to leave. "Sure thing, hun. Well, be around," Mitchell said before grabbing the remaining cards and handing them to me as Julia gave me the others as they both left the room, shutting the door behind them. I looked down at the large pile of cards and Alice's letter before sighing. Placing the letter to one side, I decided to start the cards. I had no idea who they were from. I opened up the first and began reading. "Dear Bella, get well soon. Call us when you can. We want to know all the debts. Ox, Lauren, and Jessica." Of course those two would want all the details. They probably only want to spread a load of gossip and rumors about me. Moving on to the next one, I couldn't help but laugh at the image on the front. It was of a kitten in a hospital bed, looking adorable. "Dear Bella, what did you do to get yourself in hospital? You're in a coma and so much trouble. Lots of love, Jake XX." Oh great. Jake's going to flip. I need to try and call him. I moved on to the next and immediately recognized the writing as my father's. "This should be interesting, dear Bella. What happened? Everyone's so confused. You go missing the same day as the Cullens leave town and everyone is going mental. I thought you had run off with them to start with, but I refuse to believe it. I know you're not that irresponsible." Suddenly, 2 days later, I get a call from Mitch saying you're in their care and in a coma. I then tried getting in contact with you over the Mind link, but it wouldn't work. It was like I was trying to swim through foam. "I hope you get better soon, my darling daughter. Contact me when you can, Dad XXX. By the end, I was wiping tears from my eyes. I missed everyone so much and I still didn't know where I was exactly. I continued to read the cards thoroughly, sobbing at some, laughing at others. I even had a card from the family who had found me. They said they visited frequently but had gone to Spain for a week. They should be back tomorrow. Apparently, I really need to thank them. I had also received a card from the entire of Forks High, the police force, the reservation kids, with a note from Jake apologizing, and one from a few people individually, Mike, Eric, Angela, Lauren and Jess. Sighing, I realized I could no longer put off the inevitable. I only had Alice's letter to read right now and I honestly was torn between reading in and burning it. I reached for it with shaky hands, noticing how she hadn't put it in an envelope, only tied a piece of string around it. I almost laughed. Almost. It was ironic. She'd probably seen me getting another paper cut or something. Slowly I pulled at the bow on the string, letting it fall to the floor. I unfolded the first part of the letter and took a shaky breath before I began reading. Dearest Bella, I am so sorry for what you are about to discover, and that is enough. Everyone knows not to start a letter with an apology. It's just a sure way to put anyone off reading on. I put the letter on the side, half tucked under the water jug before my eyes widened. I needed to pee, like really badly. I tried to swing my legs around and off the bed, but they refused to move, still asleep, and probably extremely weak from not being used for 4 months. I reached over to the button which the nurses had pointed out to me before pressing the call button and hoping someone would come quickly. Within 15 seconds someone was already walking into my room and I soon recognized it as Julia. Thank God it's a woman. Are you okay, dear? Not in any pain, are you? Do you need some more meds? She said in a motherly way, reminding me of Esme with a harsh slap. No, I'm fine, honest. I just need the toilet and my legs are still asleep. I said with a slight laugh as a small smile grated my lips. Oh, that's to be expected. Come on, it'll help you. Some of your injuries might make it a bit painful to walk, by the way. You had a very deep gash on your back. Took a long surgery to fix that one. Oh, I can't feel it at the moment. I'm just sore everywhere. Where actually am I, by the way? I asked, curious to have answers. You're in Montana Intensive Care Hospital, she answered, pulling me into a sitting position so my legs were hanging off the side of the bed. Montana, I exclaimed, my eyes widening as I gasped for air. I had managed to run across 2 states in my breakdown. How long was I running for? Julia gave me a worried look which I waved off with a small smile, before she took hold of my arm. Okay, 3, 2, 1. She said before pulling my arm only for me to collapse to the floor with a yelp. Bella. Are you okay? Have you hurt yourself? She asked, gently grabbing onto my legs as I leaned against the side cabin. As she grabbed onto my legs, my eyes widened with a mixture of shock and horror. Julia, I stammered, I can't feel anything in my legs. She looked at me with wide eyes, almost as if she had seen a ghost. Oh, my God, she breathed out. That was when I knew something was seriously wrong. Come on, Bella, you can do it. 5 minutes more and we can call it a day. My trainer, Ethan, encouraged me. It had been a month since I woke up from my coma. A month since I found out I had what they called paraplegia paralysis, or in shorter terms, I was paralyzed from the waist down. I couldn't walk. The doctors thought I never would be able to again, but I demanded to be given a chance, and after my dad arrived they caved. I knew with my shifter healing, I would have a higher chance of walking again, but I couldn't really tell them that, could I? I wanted to go back to Forks, but apparently they didn't have the facilities for my rehabilitation back there. It wasn't particularly surprising, but still disappointing. Charlie updated me of the latest news from Forks, and the guys from the res did the same every time they visited. Angela and Eric had visited once, but said that it was hard and expensive to get here, so we agreed to keep in contact over phone. Sighing, I withdrew from my inner rambling and tried to gather my strength. I was about 3 months along a human rehabilitation course already, and all the doctors were shocked. I held on to the bars on either side of me, supporting most my weight on my arms before slowly willing my leg to move. To start with, it didn't, and I panicked. Yet again my legs had just seemed to switch off. "I'm sorry, I can't. It's gone." I apologized weakly. "Hey, it's fine, honestly you're doing amazingly well. I've never seen anything like your recovery before," Ethan said to me while helping me into my wheelchair. He began to push me down the familiar corridor back to my recovery room, chatting the whole way. I didn't pay him much attention, I never did, but suddenly something caught my interest. So, I was speaking to Genna, and guess what she said? She said that by the end of the week you should be able to go home and then just have rehabilitation 3 times a week in Seattle. "Isn't that amazing?" he exclaimed happily. "Wait, what?" I asked. "You're going home." He beamed as he helped me onto my small bed. "What? I'm going home, I am going home." I screamed with excitement, bouncing as much as I could in my bed. "Hey, maybe I should have told you that earlier. It's sure made your legs want to cooperate," he mumbled, scratching the back of his head. "Oh, shut up," I said loudly, flapping my arms. "Okay, whatever you say, princess, see you later," he called while abruptly leaving my room. "Rude much?" my wolf said, startling me. "Oh, so now you decide to show up again. I thought you had died or something," I said, irritation leaking into my tone. "Yay, whatever, I've been busy," she replied, and I could feel her mentally rolling her eyes. "Doing what exactly?" I snapped. "Talking to the fates." "We didn't imprint on Edward, what?" I asked, freezing. "You should have read the goddamned letter," she snapped once more before disappearing. The letter. I knew where it was, I just wasn't willing to get it. It wasn't that I couldn't get it, I just didn't want to. Yet, against all my will, I somehow found myself reaching into the small bedside drawer and pulling it out. I sighed and accepted my fate. I was going to have to read this one day. I just didn't really expect it to be today. "Dearest Bella, I am so sorry you are having to read this. Oh Bella, why are you so difficult? Did it seriously take you a month to find the cottage to read on? Edward really did destroy your spirit. Anyway, sorry for that. I'm sorry for a lot actually. I can't help but feel I am to blame for all this. I should have seen it but I didn't. I know that you are paralyzed but I can't see anything else. You silly shifter. I can't see much about you. I'm surprised I saw what I did in the first place. Now, please don't be upset PR panic when I say this but, well you see, Edward's gone. With the Denalies he admitted Tanya was his mate. I'm so sorry. He ran off with her an hour after you and we haven't heard of either of them since. 3 days later me and Jasper had an argument. I don't know what happened but when he came back from ripping up the forest the sparks were gone. Our bond was gone. Everything is so confusing and Carlisle is having to deal with it all. With the Denalies gone by the time you are finally reading this, Rose and Emmett on their latest honeymoon and me and Jasper no longer mates, he is so stressed and it's scaring everyone. Please come back here as soon as you can. I can feel the tension building. I think something bad is going to happen. Something very, very bad, and I get the feeling we will only be able to stop it if you are here. With us. Alice Ox. Oh. My God. What the hell is going on? Bella. Come on, you can do it, you're almost there. Charlie exclaimed, trying to get me to move my legs on my own, something I had not yet achieved. Dad. I hissed, my cheeks red with embarrassment. Can you please just help me into the wheelchair? I'm doing fine with my recovery as it is. Charlie huffed slightly before giving me a small smile. Fine, come on then, he replied, helping me swing my legs off the edge of the bed before picking me up and placing me into the wheelchair. See, you almost did it there, Bells, I felt that. Your muscles tensing slightly, that's what we want, right, doctor? He asked. The young male doctor stood at the side of my bed. Yes, she's doing amazingly. We didn't expect her to ever regain motion in her legs ever again. At this rate, one day, you may even be able to heal fully and possibly walk again, although that will take a lot of training. Your muscles will have totally deteriorated by then. Not trying to be a downer or anything. The doctor replied, reminding me of the harshness of this all. Exactly what I was trying to avoid. Great. Well, I'm going to find Ethan, Julia and Mitchell to give them these, I said, sniffing slightly, as I picked up the bag containing the chocolate and flowers before wheeling myself out of the room with a little struggle. I wish they had done some more arm exercises with me. I'm already tired. I quickly found my way to the small staff canteen, knowing it was their lunch break at the moment and that they would be stuffing their faces. Julia, Ethan, Mitchell, I called playfully while pushing over the light door to the canteen. Over here, Bella, Julia replied after a moment, drawing my attention to the far end of the canteen, where sure enough, I could see her Mitchell and Ethan along with a few of the other doctors and nurses. What brought you here at a time like this? Ethan asked as I approached their table. What do you mean a time like this? I quickly checked my watch. 12:32. I exclaimed with a small giggle, causing a small stab of pain to shoot through my chest from the large gash still healing there. I ignored it. Well, this is a very important time for us. We're eating. That's not something we can do whenever we want to, unlike you little miss, Ethan explained. Of course all you think about is food. Anyway, I'm here to say goodbye. I'm going now, remember? I asked, watching the realization hit them like a train in sync. It was funny, to be honest. Oh my gosh, how did we forget? Mitchell exclaimed dramatically, making me roll my eyes. Chill, I'm not your only patient. Here, have these. I have to go now, I said, smiling while handing them each a box of chocolates and a bunch of the flowers which turned out to be tulips. I had the other doctors and nurses aw slightly as Julia blushed fiercely and Ethan and Mitchell suddenly went very quiet. Well, miss you a lot, Bella. Call us anytime. You have our number still, right? Mitchell asked. Of course I do, silly, I said, chuckling to myself and rolling my shoulders absent-mindedly. Bella. You in here? Came a shout from outside. Charlie. And that's my cue to leave. Bye, I'll call you all later. I called before quickly leaving. I have always been bad at goodbyes. Ready, Bells? Charlie asked as he began pushing me along the brightly lit corridors of the hospital, towards the main entrance. As ready as I'll ever be, god damn it. I cursed quietly as my pencil rolled off the side of my desk, onto the floor out of my reach. That's my third pencil, I huffed to myself before deciding to give up on trying to solve question 13 on my calculus homework and rolling onto my bed. I had asked Charlie to rearrange my room so that my bed was pushed up against the window with my desk at the end so that I could move between the two without having to worry about walking. I had only been home 3 hours but was already finding a huge pile of things I can no longer do or were now extremely difficult. For one, I can't shower, I can't stand. How would I shower? 2, I couldn't really wear jeans anymore. It was just too difficult and I hate skirts. Joy. 3, I can't pick up things I drop, which I do a lot. 4, I can't get to the bathroom very easily anymore, and 5, if I want to go downstairs Charlie has to practically carry me. I sighed before looking in the mirror across the room. My hair was frantic and frizzy and I had big circles under my eyes to rival even the Cullens, who had for some reason not been seen since my incident, even though apparently they haven't left town. I reached over to my bedside table to grab my brush before I tried pulling it through my hair a few times. After about 5 minutes my hair was tamed and back to its usual brown mop. The circles under my eyes were still there, but hey, what can you do about that? I'm just tired. Knock knock, came a booming voice from outside my door, startling me slightly. Was that surprise? Jake yelled, bursting through my door, slamming it against the wall, no doubt leaving a dent. Yep. It's Jake. Sorry, Bells, we tried to stop him, said another voice from the doorway. Embry. Wait, we? I looked up to see the whole pack plus Emily stood outside my room. Even Billy was there, looking at me with a sympathetic gaze. They all began piling into my room, making me feel like I was one of those clowns magicians got 20 of into a 2-seater car. Weird, right? Jake, Embry, Seth and Colin all managed to squeeze on my bed with me as Sam sat in my wheelchair before pulling Emily onto his lap. Jared and Leah both sat on my window alcove, while Billy wheeled himself slightly inside my door. I looked around the room and began counting us all, just for the sake of it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Wow, 9 of us fit into my room, impressive. Now, any news? What have I missed? How are you all? I asked, smiling slightly. We're all fine, Bella. Honestly, we should be the ones asking you that, not the other way around, Jared said with a small smile. Yes, well, I want to know how you're doing as well. Now, any news? They all looked around at each other. I knew they were hiding something from me and I wanted to know what. I didn't like things being kept from me. What are you hiding? I demanded. Tell me. Bella, calm down. We just don't know how you'll take it, Billy said, breaking the tense silence. Just spill it. I sighed, leaning against Jake and closing my eyes, enjoying the darkness. Okay, I'll explain then. Here goes nothing. I heard Sam mutter, but I had the faint impression I wasn't meant to hear. Okay, so let's start with the day you disappeared? I supplied. Yes, disappeared. Okay, so Seth and Jared were out doing patrol when they saw 2 leeches running past, a blonde female with an unfamiliar scent and Edward Cullen. We chased them, but they disappeared off into the woods pretty quickly and we thought nothing of it, until we got a phone call from Charlie 4 hours later, asking if you were with us. That worried us. We all assumed you were with Cullen, him being your imprint. He's not my imprint. Don't ask how. He just isn't. I interrupted. What? Never mind later, anyway. So we called a meeting with the Cullens and near forced them to spill. The other coven was there as well but left halfway through saying something about Sanya. He trailed off, asking me a silent question. Tanya, I grimaced. Yes, that was it, Tanya. And when they had gone we finally found out what happened. And damn bells, I didn't know you could control fire. Jake exclaimed, making me laugh and Sam scowl. I'm telling this bit, I like it, he added, directing it at Sam mainly. Sam rolled his eyes but nodded, allowing him to continue. So, Alice did most of the talking. She seemed to be the only one who actually knew what was going on. She said that Edward could not only read minds but manipulate them. He made them all believe that you had tried to kill the other coven and made you believe you had imprinted on him, both of which we know aren't true now. All of the Cullens were stunned. I guess they didn't think they would be fooled, huh? Jared interrupted, taking over the storytelling. We all talked for a while and they told us how you had bolted off in our direction. They assumed you were coming to us, but no, you end up in freaking Montana, don't you? He exclaimed, making me smile slightly, as Jake's arms tightened around my waist. We all went home but were woken up at 3 in the morning by Sam shouting that they had found you and that you were in hospital in a coma. Oh, boy was Jake mad. He finished, making all the pack laugh as Jake growled lowly. Yes, I certainly remember being woken by a snarling wolf at 3 in the morning. It wasn't very pleasant, almost gave me a heart attack. Emily added, and I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. She didn't have a very good history with angry wolves after all, and this couldn't have helped. So, I began, are the Cullens still here? Everyone looked at each other again, making me irritated. Just tell me already. Leah sighed before speaking. Unfortunately, yes. Ugwan, I groaned, repeatedly banging my head on my light purple wall. Why are they still here? Well, Edward's gone but the rest of them aren't. I sighed loudly, asking fate what I did to make it hate me so much. Okay, well it's getting late now, you should head home for dinner, I said suddenly, feeling smothered. I wanted some space to process this all without feeling like I was being suffocated. They all gave me a worried look but eventually agreed, smiling slightly at me before walking out my room, Billy shutting the door behind him. I tried to get my phone but couldn't reach it, so I reached for my small notepad and pen, deciding to just write a note, knowing it would work. Alice, we need to talk. I sighed before collapsing back onto my bed, playing with the ends of my long, brown hair. Maybe I should have it cut sometime. I made myself comfy in my huge pile of pillows and stuffed toys, practically burying myself in them all. I knew Alice would be looking into my future and was right, because not even 30 seconds later, a tiny, black-haired pixie was climbing through my open window. She gracefully landed on her heeled feet before turning around to face me, a look of guilt on her face as I glared coldly at her. "Bella, so," she began before I cut her off. "Alice, if you're going to apologize, don't." She gave me a shocked look. I guess she wasn't expecting that. I, for once, had caught Alice off guard. "Can I explain at least?" "I am going to explain," she said, more to herself than me. "So, right after you left, we were all so confused. Edward disappeared with Tanya immediately, saying some giant speech about how stupid we all were and such, being totally rude. Long story short, she ranted, making me laugh slightly. At this she looked up at me and beamed, moving from her space by the window to the edge of my bed, perching on it lightly. "So anyway, we all tried calling you, trying to figure out what was going on. I didn't even understand. I had seen a vision of you threatening Tanya with fire. We couldn't get through to you, so we decided to call the Mutts. Pack." I cut her off sharply, biting my tongue to stop my less than polite comments. Yes, Pack, whatever you want to call them. We called them and they said they assumed that you were with us as per usual. That's when we all really started panicking. We had no idea where you were. We tried following your scent, but the rain had long washed it away. We gave up after searching all night. The next day at about 3 in the afternoon, Carlisle called us saying the hospital just got a call from the Montana Intensive Hospital saying you were in a coma. "A coma, Bella," she said, becoming hysterical. She hunched over and leaned her forearms on her knees, supporting her shaking figure. I hastily dragged myself to her, trying to wrap my arms around her small, unmoving frame. Alice, calm down. Please just calm down, listen to me." "Where's Jasper? The others?" Just breathe." I stuttered slightly, trying to comfort my former best friend. Suddenly another vampire was in the room, violently snatching Alice from me and into their arms. I tried to calm my own breathing from the shock of this sudden invasion, as I could hear a light mutter coming from the pair of them, but it was too low for me to hear in my current state. I could only hear few things they were saying, and it was really starting to annoy me. Hello, ooh?" I said, sarcastically, rolling my eyes. Immediately I was being hissed at by a very angry, unknown vampire. He crouched protectively over Alice, backing her into the corner furthest from me. "Caleb, stop!" Alice cried from behind him. "Who is this Caleb guy? It'll continue now, Bella," Alice said, stressing my name. I saw Caleb stiffen before sending me a quick look and pulling Alice out from behind him and crushing her to his side. "Okay, let me continue." After 2 days, the rest of the Dennelis left saying something about getting a call from Tanya. We haven't heard from them or Edward since. It's very confusing, but it doesn't stop there. I was definitely confused. What else could possibly happen? "Well, this is Caleb, my mate." "What the hell? What?" I screeched. "I thought that Jasper was you, mate. What the heck is going on? Anything else you'd like to tell me? Any other secrets?" Well. Is Emmett secretly gay? Rosalie a fairy from the mythical land of Narnia? Or is she the Ice Queen? That would make sense. I ranted, tugging at my hair and waving my arms to exaggerate my words. "Bella, please calm down. I'll explain everything. Jasper was never my mate, he was only my companion until we both found our mates. Jasper found his a while ago, but she was being tricked into thinking she was another's mate. I only found Caleb 2 weeks after you disappeared. The Mutt Pack," she corrected herself, noticing my glare, "were chasing him from their land. Gave me a near heart attack when I saw a vision of him running from 3 giant wolves," she explained, finally giving me all the information I wanted. Suddenly, both her and Caleb's heads snapped to my door before there was a slight breeze, and I found myself alone in my room, again. I was broken from my thoughts by a rapid knocking on my door. "Bella, you okay in there?" I thought I heard shouting. Charlie called, opening my door slightly. "I'm fine, Dad, Alice just came to visit." "Is dinner almost ready? I'm starved," I said, giving him a weak smile. "You know me, Bells, I just ordered some pizza. It should be here in about half an hour. I'm going to go out for a quick run in the meantime. I haven't shifted in a while," he said sheepishly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Sure thing, Dad, it'll be fine," I said, waving him off. I watched through my window as I saw him disappear into the woods moments later, in the form of a coyote. I longed to be able to shift. I was becoming restless from not being able to. I had tried shifting once at the hospital, which only resulted in my stay being prolonged and my pain meds strengthened. I didn't want to attempt to shift again anytime soon. No way. The next day I woken up to silence. Rolling over I saw a small note, folded in half, with my name on it in Charlie's messy handwriting. "He had an early shift this morning, Bells. Didn't want to wake you. Leftover pizzas in the fridge, will be back by 6 and I've left your chair at the bottom of the stairs, Dad." Oh joy. I get the whole day to myself. How wonderful, how amazing, how spectacularly amazing. Okay, I think you get my point. If you couldn't tell, I wasn't very happy. Sighing, I pulled myself up into a sitting position, and with a bit of difficulty, moved myself so I was sitting on the edge of my bed. I quickly realized I wouldn't be able to get to my clothes drawer from my bed and was stumped. However, I could see a small, white bag sticking out from behind my bedside table. I stared at it curiously for a moment before stretching over and picking it up. There was a small, paper tag attached to the handle with one single sentence written on it in an elegant script. "I wasn't sure what you would like, Rosalie." I was stumped. Why would Rosalie give me anything? Hesitantly, I opened the bag, scolding myself for being silly once I saw it was simply a bag of clothes. I tipped the contents of it out, onto my bed and instantly noticed it was full of skirts, no jeans, and tops. I began to get annoyed before I realized that what Rosalie had done was extremely thoughtful. I couldn't really wear jeans now, could I? I picked out a long, light pink maxi skirt, a cropped gray wrap-round top and a gray cardigan. I reached under my bed and felt around for a bit until I found my fluffy slippers. With a little bit of difficulty, I managed to get them onto my feet, which still hung limply at the ends of my legs. I sighed, realizing my next task, getting downstairs. I don't think Charlie really thought that through. "I need some crutches. Maybe would help me walk again, but where on earth can I get crutches?" I gasped suddenly, realizing my stupidity. I have my own pair of crutches in my wardrobe, 2 meters away. Why wouldn't I? Being the world's biggest klutz and all. After a moment of deliberation, I decoded there was no graceful way to do it and just fell of my bed, onto my carpet, making a small thump. Using my arms, I pulled myself over to my small oak wardrobe before reaching up to the brass handle and opening it. I instantly saw the crutches and pulled them out, making me whine as one of them fell straight on me. Ouch. I opened my sock drawer before pulling out a pair of stripy pink and white fluffy socks. I dragged myself over to my wicked chair that I usually laid my clothes on and somehow managed to pull myself onto it with only my arms. I propped the crutches up against the wall next to me and left the socks in my lap for a moment as I caught my breath. Arching my back in a cat-like fashion, I reached for the crutches and put one sock on each handle before grabbing one in each hand. I took a deep breath before pushing my weight onto the crutches and did something I doubted I ever would again: stand. I gasped sharply, almost losing my balance and tumbling to the ground. That would not be good. Not at all. I turned myself around, leaning heavily on the crutches, and began to slowly move towards my door. I placed the crutches in front of me, one at a time, before dragging each foot as well as I could. By the time I had reached my doorway, 5 minutes later, both my arms and legs were aching. I felt a slight breeze and froze. Where did that come from? I began to worry. I knew for a fact all my windows were shut. I had looked a few minutes ago. In fact, since I'd been visited by Alice, I had locked them as well, and closing them. Vampires didn't really seem to understand when they weren't welcome. Hey, sweet pea. An enthusiastic voice broke me from my thoughts, making a shriek burst from my lips as the ground suddenly began getting closer. I shut my eyes, preparing for the impact, but instead found myself being pulled into two strong, cold arms. I unscrunched my face and opened my eyes, coming face to face with a vampire. I couldn't doubt they were a vampire, for they had red eyes. Blood-red eyes. A scream pierced the air, and it took me a moment to realize I was the cause of the horrible sound. I flung myself from the strange vampire's arms, landing harshly on the carpeted floor before I began dragging myself away, not looking where I was going. Mistake number 1. I felt the familiar sensation of falling as I began tumbling down the stairs, painfully hitting each one. However, before I could go much further, I felt myself being lifted into another pair of smaller, yet equally as cold arms. At this point, I was a shaking, blubbering mess. I was placed in the large armchair in my living room as silence filled the room, only my quiet whimpering to be heard. After a few minutes, I managed to calm myself down, as I scolded myself internally. I had just shown so much weakness in such a short space of time, and I hated it. I needed to put on a tough front. They couldn't see me looking so vulnerable. With this, I stopped sniffing and pushed my hair away from my eyes, looking at the two vampires, sat together in the armchair across from me. Properly for the first time, I noticed there was one male and one female. The man had a rough mop cut of dirty blonde hair messily arranged upon his head and was very well built, broad shoulders and firm chest. He looked wild in every way, untamed, and this was what made the slight tinge of fear ebb into my system. His skin was pale, like every other vampire, but seemed to have some kind of rough texture wherever I looked. But still, his most noticeable feature were his eyes. His blood-red eyes, which somehow seemed to hold a playful look to them, whilst the rest of his stance seemed guarded and vicious beyond belief. The woman had long blonde hair that reached her mid-back and was well kept, a giant contrast to her companion. She had a petite frame with her perfectly small features, red eyes and pale skin, which like the male's had a rough texture. Her eyes, however, seemed to be void of most emotions, only small flickers shining through occasionally. "Well, care to explain what the hell you're doing in my house?" I asked dryly after a few minutes, turning to look at the pair of them. They both looked at each other, probably shocked by my seemingly calm tone and composure, the polar opposite of my previous attitude. I internally sighed. By the looks of it, they thought I was just a regular human. But why would they come to my house and then not eat me? The man seemed to break out of his shock sooner than his companion. "Sorry for scaring you, ma'am. That wasn't in my intentions," he began, a thick southern tang filling his voice. "But we have something to talk to you about. My name is Peter Whitlock and this is my mate, Charlotte." He looked lovingly at the woman, who I now know as Charlotte, and pulled her closer to his chest. "Whitlock, as in Jasper Whitlock?" I asked, my brows scrunching up in confusion as I leaned forward in my seat slightly. "Exactly as in Jasper Whitlock." The woman, Charlotte, spoke up for the first time, her eyes meeting my own. "So sweet pea, will you let us explain?" Peter asked, cocking his head to one side whilst flashing me a charming smile. "Only if you get me peanut butter." "So, let me get this straight, you and you," I said, pointing to Peter and Charlotte, both fought in some funky vampire war with Jasper like 200 years ago or something? I asked, leaning further back in the chair I was sat in. "That's right, hun," Charlotte said, exhaling deeply and flashing her sharp teeth in a small smile. "Jasper joined the Confederate Army before he turned 17. He was very persuasive, even as a human. In 2 years, he was promoted to major in the Army and became the youngest major in Texas. One night, after evacuating women and children, he was on his way back to Galveston, where he met 3 vampires. Maria knew from his suit that he was in the military and changed him, hoping his skills and training would come in useful. He and other newborns helped Maria reclaim her territory and later claim others. Nettie and Lucy gained territories of their own. But when they tried to kill Maria, Jasper sensed their emotions and helped Maria kill them. Since Maria wouldn't keep vampires after the first year of their transformations, Jasper was responsible for disposing of them, something he hated because he could feel their pain when he killed them just as much as he could feel the pain of his human victims. Over time, the pain and cruelty depressed him to no end. When I met him, I managed to get him to open up to me a bit, and he convinced Maria to let me live as his captain. Peter clarified, summing up the last hour's conversation in a 2-minute explanation. When Peter ran off with me, on the night I was supposed to be killed, it was only because Jasper allowed us to escape. After this, Maria's feelings for him changed. He could sense how fearful, and somewhat mistrustful, she was toward him, and knew that she would plot a way to destroy him. He began planning how to destroy her first, despite his reluctance to the idea of destroying the one person who mattered to him. But his years in the coven had affected him so deeply that he almost became a savage. Charlotte continued, moving slightly in Peter's lap. In 1938, I came back and told Jasper about the way vampires lived up north. He immediately left Maria and her coven to join us. However, he wasn't happy, since he could still feel the emotions of his human victims, which depressed him. Eventually, he left. He tried to kill less often, but the thirst always grew overwhelming. Peter finished. I was shocked. I had never expected to hear anything like this about Jasper. I couldn't imagine him being how Peter and Charlotte describe him as being. What? And then you heard from him, however much later, when he found Alice? I asked, still shocked. Pretty much, sweet pea. Peter chuckled, wrapping his arm around Charlotte to keep her still. Well, that was a nice story and all, but why did you tell me? I mean, I'm not exactly best buddies with him, I said, perplexed as to why they had just explained Jasper's whole life story to me, a total stranger. We can't tell you why we told you, and we probably shouldn't have told you, but if Jasper asks who told you, it was not us, okay? Peter rushed out, flapping his arms around like a deranged bird trying to fly. Okay, whatever you say, I trailed off, deciding not to question it further as I knew it would ultimately only end up confusing me. Do the Cullens even know you're here? I suddenly asked, my eyes widening slightly. Nope, Peter replied, leaning back in the chair while putting his feet up on the small coffee table, somehow balancing Charlotte on his lap the whole time. Don't ask me how, I don't know. Well, shouldn't you let the Cullens know you're here at least? I mean, there is a pack of shifters about 15 minutes away who would kill you without a second thought if they wanted to. I continued, not wanting to have to piece back together two friends of Jasper's. At that moment, Peter's eyes seemed to glaze over. He looked eerily still and lifelike, almost identical to how Alice was during one of her visions. I sent a worried glance to Charlotte, who looked at her mate before she began studying the sofa's material. Was she not at all worried by this? She seemed to feel my eyes on her as her head snapped up, her ruby red eyes meeting my less interesting brown ones. The question must have been clear in my eyes as she gave Peter a quick look before speaking. He's just consulting with his gift, Suga, don't worry about it. I nodded in understanding. Peter had briefly explained his gift earlier, even though he hated to call it a gift, saying he just knew shit. The idiot had a gift whether he wanted to accept the fact or not. It was true. Stupid vampire. A moment later, Peter shook his head slightly before tightening his grip on Charlotte's waist. Looks like we won't have to go and visit the Cullens actually, he voiced, puzzling me. Of course we did. Did he want to get killed by a pack of wolves? I mean, I could probably stop the pack if I really wanted, but Peter was just being stupid. Furiously, I began to voice my thoughts. You definitely do have to go and see the Cullens. Are you crazy? Do you want to I was suddenly cut off by Peter's voice. 2001. The front door was thrown off its hinges, causing it to smash into the utility table, sending the papers on it to fall to the ground messily. An ungodly screech burst from my lips as I fell off the sofa, landing heavily on the floor, among the papers. Someone is going to be killed, I swear to God. Bella? Where are you? Are you okay? A frantic blonde vampire called from the doorway. Jasper? Within a second, I found myself sat in a pair of strong, cold arms in the far corner of the room. Fireworks and tingles exploded over my skin, everywhere we touched. I was confused and panicked by the sudden turn of events. "Jasper, let me go," I cried, becoming restless as his arms caged me, like I was a wild animal. I didn't like the feeling, not one bit. I continued to struggle in his arms, small whimpers slipping through my lips as my panic rose to a new level. The whole time, Jasper seemed unaware of my uncomfortable emotions. Despite being a supposed empath, he buried his head into the crook of my neck, inhaling deeply. Was he going to bite me? Kill me? Why weren't Peter or Charlotte doing anything? "Get off! Get off! Get off!" I yelled, finally managing to free myself of Jasper's arms as I scrambled away desperately, dragging myself with my arms as much as I could. "Bella," he exhaled, sounding exasperated, "just listen." "Listen? You have just barged into my house, breaking my door, which you are replacing by the way, and then grabbed onto me. Without a single explanation. Look at me," he demanded before appearing crouched down in front of me, reaching for my face. He firmly pulled my chin so that our eyes connected. At that moment my whole world slipped into place, before slipping right past and being destroyed again. I imprinted on Jasper, but I was done with this whole imprint thing. It had hurt me once, I won't let it do the same again. No way. No, 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 nope. No way on earth. So not happening, just, no. I ranted under my breath, turning my back to them all. I could not believe this. I had imprinted on Jasper, or was it just another lie? I didn't know and I didn't care to find out. "Just go, I'm not interested," I said quietly, knowing they would all hear, hoping they would all listen. I heard a sharp inhale of breath before many things seemed to happen at once. I couldn't say what because it all happened too fast, but by the time I had spun around, eyes wide and arms raised, I was alone. Once more. The only sign showing they were ever here was the absence of the front door. I sat on the floor, my back slumped against the wall as tears slowly began to leak from my eyes and run down my face like a river. I cried until all my sorry was gone and was replaced by a numb feeling of nothingness. I began feeling caged again, only this time I wasn't caged by anything other than my own body and mind. I wanted to be free, to break away from this seemingly never-ending nightmare of ties and responsibilities. As I thought more, a new emotion began to replace my previous numbness, anger. I was seething. How dare that any of them just appear unannounced and act like they own this place, because they don't. Heat began to surge through my body. It began at my heart and seemed to quickly flow through my veins, into every cell and organ in my body, changing me, shaping me, shifting me. I gasped in sudden realization as I felt my sight leave momentarily as my bones snapped and popped into place. My skin inched as something began growing out of it. My fingers seemed to tie together and my face reconstructed itself entirely. I was shifting at last, but into what, I was unsure. With one final wave of heat I found myself fully shifted in my living room. I rapidly blinked the black dots away, desperate to clear my vision. Name determine my form. After a minute, I had regained my sight and was more coordinated. I tried looking back at myself, and was mildly surprised by my form. For some reason, after all this time my conscience had decided to take fate into its own hands and do this. Often it's the deepest pain which empowers you to grow into your highest self. I found myself mumbling the familiar quote, "Deepest pain," I snorted humorously. Sure got that right. I stretched in my new form and felt an odd sensation. Freezing where I was, I looked back to see my wings fully stretched out, ready to fly. My eyes widened and a squawk left my beak. Yay, beak. As I slowly moved my wings, up, down, the question I was dying to answer shoved its way to the front of my mind, and without a second thought I furiously flapped my wings, catapulting myself into the air of my living room. After a moment, I was in control of my movements and could begin to fathom what had happened. I was flying, I was free, I wasn't being held back by anything anymore. Without a second thought, I swooped out the gap in the wall where my front door once was. Before racing into the forest, I wove in and out of the trees, enjoying my enhanced vision after what seemed like a lifetime. I flew along the small stream in between Forks and La Push for a while before ascending higher to the treetops as the sun began to set. I could feel the warm afternoon breeze against my skin as the only sound around for miles was my wings steadily beating. The faint smell of pine filled my nose as I was surrounded by an oddly placed feeling of ease. I knew I should be fretting over this second imprint thing, but I wasn't. I let the sunset take all my worries away from me. Apart from one, how was I going to explain the door to Charlie? Gods above, please help me. When I returned home, I saw Charlie's cruiser pulled up on the driveway and cursed myself mentally. Why didn't I keep track of time? The sun set like an hour ago, so it must be at least 8 by now. Charlie gets off his shift at 7. I dove down, expecting the door to still be absent, but to my surprise and slight horror, somehow it had managed to be salvaged and reattached to the door frame. My amazement didn't last long, however, as despite my attempts, I flew straight into the door with a loud bang. I heard Charlie mute the game from inside before quick footsteps made their way to the door. A second later it was open to reveal Charlie. His expression changed from worry to confusion as he saw no one in his line of sight. Squawking loudly, his gaze instantly snapped down to me, his eyes widening as he took me in. "Bella?" he asked, stuttering slightly while moving out the way and opening the door a bit more. I gave him an annoyed look, which must have been quite funny to see on a bird, before looking at my little legs, then back up at Charlie. "Oh, right, sorry Bells," Charlie said sheepishly, being down to place me onto his right forearm. He walked us into the living room, kicking the front door shut behind us before placing me on the sofa that I had been sat on earlier. I quickly shifted back before stretching my limbs out and sighing in relief. I was so tired, yet I knew I would have a lot of explaining to do. "Well, first, you can shit now. Second, what happened to my door? Third, where were you? No note, not text, no nothing." I was worried out of my mind. "Bella, I got back from work to see there was no door and your wheelchair and crutches were here, but you weren't. I was ready to call the station when you flew into the door," Charlie ranted while pacing the living room. "The only clue I had to the fact you had shifted and might have been okay was this." He held up a single feather. "What? A feather? A feather?" I asked uncertainly, leaning forwards in the chair to try and get a better view. "A phoenix feather. Oh, wait. One of my phoenix feathers? Let me see," I exclaimed gleefully. Charlie sighed before walking over and handing me the feather. It was a dark red in the center, which gradually blended into a dark orange. Right on the very tips of the feather was a light yellow patch, up and down both sides. It was beautiful. "Wow, I think I'll make a necklace from this." Mumbling to myself, I turned the feather in my hands a few times before placing it down next to me. Yes, you do that. Now? What happened to the door?" "Well, he's not wasting any time." I sighed loudly. "You might want to sit down, it's a long story." With that I proceeded to tell Charlie the events of the day, leading up to and after the explanation of the previously missing door. I told him about how Peter and Charlotte arrived and told me Jasper's story. I didn't tell him Jasper's story, however. I didn't feel it was my place to do that. 3 hours and a lot of talking later, I had finished. "Wow, that's a lot in one day, but Bella, I wouldn't worry about Jasper. He seems like a nice guy. Give him a chance. He is your actual imprint and you his mate. He would die for you without a second thought if it ever came to it. I've seen him, I've seen his scars, and I know he must have been through a lot to be able to receive them and live to tell the tale." I listened to Charlie and understood it all in a new way at last. I knew I had to give Jasper a chance. It'd been unfair on him and simply acted from fear. "They'll go and see him tomorrow, it's late now. Night chi dad," I decided, before heading upstairs to my safe haven, my bedroom. Quickly brushing my teeth on the way, I went into my room and began stripping. I quickly changed into my pajamas, which consisted of a light night dress and panties, before pulling my light curtains across my window. I got into my heavenly bed and pulled the duvet up to my neck. I was on the brink of sleep when I heard my window slide open. Instantly I sat up and switched on my bedside lamp, just in time to see a figure sliding in through my window. I instantly recognized him. Jasper. Bella, I thought you were asleep, he spoke. Well, I almost was, but now you're here I think I'll be able to sleep even better. My words were slurred my sleep. I patted the space on my bed next to me, and he quickly joined me in bed, hesitantly wrapping his arms around my waist. I shrunk into his chest, letting him know I was comfortable, and he seemed to relax. A second later I heard a click and the room was plunged into complete darkness. Night, red eyes. I mumbled sleepily. He drew in a sharp breath from being me. I didn't think you'd noticed, he whispered in a fragile voice. Of course I noticed, I think they're beautiful. When I awoke I was alone in my bed. I felt a slight twinge of disappointment but quickly brushed it off. Sitting up, my eyes caught sight of the exercise leaflet on the floor. The hospital had given it to me, and it explained which exercises I needed to do in between my monthly rehabilitation sessions. I used my arms to swing my legs off the edge of my bed and bent down to pick it up. However, when I sat back up I let out a shriek as I saw I was no longer alone and now had 3 increasingly familiar vampires in my room. What are you doing? I yelped, trying to pull my nightdress down to cover more of my legs which only showed more cleavage. I heard 2 simultaneous hisses, one from Charlotte and one from Jasper. Charlotte slapped Peter who was staring at me with wide eyes before I quickly found myself being sheltered by Jasper's large form, mine. He growled his eyes black with anger. Peter and Charlotte took a step back before leaving the room via the window. I could hear Charlotte scolding her mate and couldn't help but chuckle. Returning my attention to the man nearly sat on me, I realized he was still seething with rage. Hey, calm down Jasper, they're gone now. I said hesitantly, uncertain if my words were going to be the right choice or not. You're mine. No one should see you like this apart from me, he growled possessively. I hummed, uncomfortable with the conversation. Why don't we play 20 questions? I suggested, changing the topic. What? 20 questions? How do you play that? Jasper asked, snapping out of his rage. Has he never played 20 questions? Sorry darlin', I've not been educated in human games in a while. He unnecessarily apologized. We basically just ask each other 20 questions, 10 each. I ask you one, you answer, I answer. You ask me one, I answer, you answer, and so on. Got it? I explained. Yup, think so. Favorite color? I asked first. Mine's blue. I'm going to have to say forest green, he responded. What do you want to do in life? Jasper asked me. Well, I did want to do something with children, but now? I'm not sure, I answered, playing with the hem of my nightgown. For some reason I didn't feel self-conscious around Jasper. I wanted to be a soldier, I was so proud, but then my life took a turn south into hell, Jasper said quietly. Over the rest of the game I learned that Jasper had 2 younger sisters, a dog, a horse, loved country music, lived on a big ranch in Texas during his human years and had a love for historical books. In return, I told him all about my life in Phoenix and my childhood. I was laughing at some stupid story Jasper was telling me about his horse bucking him off into the mud when my door slammed open and Peter barged in. Alright, time's up, come and socialize with us, Bella. He whined, dragging out my name. Get out. I screamed, pulling the bed sheets to cover myself, once again conscious of my lack of clothes. Jasper let out a growl before they both left. I heard shouting from downstairs once more and rolled my eyes before pushing myself up and taking a step towards my wardrobe. Wait. What? I let out a shriek as I flapped my arms around, expecting to fall over, but somehow I managed to keep my balance. Before I could do anything else, however, my door was yet again being slammed open. For the love of God, if they break that door as well. I looked up to see all 3 of the vampires, which I seemed to have adopted, frozen in my doorway. "Let me get changed," I hissed, wobbling on my feet. "Bella, you're standing on your own, and you're more worried about getting changed?" Jasper asked irridiculously. I shrugged. "Well, I was more thinking of you, you know. I mean, I wouldn't want Charlotte staring at you in you boxers, but if you're okay with other men seeing me like—" "No," Jasper cut me off, appearing in front of me and shielding my body from Peter's view. "Okay, get out," I screamed, finally snapping. "Wow, someone's moody," I heard Peter mumble before the sound of flesh on flesh filled the air. "Ouch, woman, abused much?" Jasper's red eyes held my own before he too disappeared. I still had to talk to him about that. I grabbed into my table, leaning heavily on it as I moved myself to sit on my stool and reach across to my wardrobe. Pulling out the first thing that I could find, I ended up wearing a flowing maxi skirt and an oversized jumper. Not exactly fashionable, but comfortable at least. I pulled out a pair of fluffy socks from my impressive collection before struggling to slip them on. When I was ready, I sighed before calling out for Jasper. He instantly appeared in front of me, the door gently swinging open. "Good. He can be trained, Bella." "Bella, are you okay?" he asked frantically. I rolled my eyes before silently reaching out for him, signaling that I simply wanted to be taken downstairs. He smiled, his eyes warming with adoration before he bent down and scooped me up into his arms. Carrying me bridal style down the stairs, I closed my eyes in contempt, leaning my head against his cold, silent chest. Maybe this would work out after all. A month had passed since I had discovered I was Jasper's mate, and everything was coming along smoothly. I had become so much closer to Jasper in this short period of time than I ever was with Edward. He asked me about every single detail of my life, my likes, dislikes, dreams and fears. He knew it all. I had also grown an unbreakable bond with Peter and Charlotte. Charlotte insisted I called her Char every time I called her Charlotte. Peter was my best friend when it came to pranks, and Char was like Alice with her love for shopping. All in all, life was perfect. The Cullens had been friendly, the pack was being friendly, and I had a growing suspicion that the friendship between Charlie and Sue was more than a friendship. I looked around my now bare room. My faded purple walls were marked from where various posters and pictures had been placed from several years. The paint beneath being shielded from the slight sun that gradually made a change in the color of the paint. It probably wasn't as noticeable to the human eye, but to me, I could definitely see it. Oh well. My bed was stripped of its duvet and sheets and stood alone in the far corner, only the small chest by its side. I smiled as I took a small, wobbly step forwards, placing the last few objects scattered on my bed into the large, brown, cardboard box. This was it. This was really happening. After all this time I was moving out and going to uni, only I wouldn't be alone like I expected. Peter, Char, and Jasper were all coming with me, and I felt like I was a ticking time bomb of excitement, just waiting to explode. It wasn't just the thought of not being alone, it was the knowledge that I would have the support and soon would be starting to live my own life, free of any restraints and rules. I set the rules now, and it felt amazing. I guess I'd always been like my mother in that aspect. I couldn't be tied down, but it seemed I'd finally found someone who could keep me grounded, keep me happy. It was a nice feeling that I always wanted to have. I called for Peter to come and take the last box, and instantly he was picking it up, sending me a cheeky smile. I only rolled my eyes, used to it by now. Ever since I'd first managed to start walking unaided, he'd been suggesting I'd be able to go and run a marathon. I don't think he could quite understand or remember how the healing process for humans worked. I mean, yes, shifter healing and all, but that could only do so much. I looked out my window as I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. The cruiser was now parked out front, and I could see Jake's blue pickup rounding the corner. Looks like the pack has come to see me before I go. I quickly hobbled as best I could down the stairs, only stumbling a few times, but everyone knew better than to try and help me by now. I would rip anyone's head off if they as much as suggested I was incapable of doing a simple task such as walking down the stairs. By the time it reached the bottom, everyone had migrated into the living room. All in all, it was cramped. Charlie was sat in his armchair with Billy in his wheelchair next to him. Sam and Peter were sat on the love seat with their mates on their laps, both looking equally uncomfortable. Jasper, Paul, and Embry were all sat on the sofa while Seth, Jard and Leah were leaning against the wall. I smiled and greeted them all before sitting on Jasper's lap, the place I was most comfortable. "We need to get going soon, darlin'," Jasper whispered huskily in my ear, making a shiver rack through my body. I whimpered slightly, unsure how to react. I was feeling overwhelmed. I was moving away from the most important place of my life. Everything had happened here, the Cullens, shifting, Jasper, everything. A moment later, a wave of calm washed over me, allowing to think clearly. I sent Jasper a small smile before sighing. "We need to leave," I said, silencing the loud chattering from the pack. They all froze and stared at me with wide eyes, begging me to stay. "Why can't you just stay a bit longer?" Jake asked, with watery eyes. "If I don't leave now, I never will. This is hard for me as well, you know," I replied, my voice growing thick with emotion, over me, allowing to think clearly. I sent Jasper a small smile before sighing. "We need to leave," I said, silencing the loud chattering from the pack. They all froze and stared at me with wide eyes, begging me to stay. "Why can't you just stay a bit longer?" Jake asked, with watery eyes. "If I don't leave now, I never will. This is hard for me as well, you know," I replied, my voice growing thick with emotion. "She's right, Jacob," Charlie said. "If she doesn't leave now, she won't have enough time to get ready before her classes start next week. Texas is fairly far away." "It still doesn't make me like it anymore," Jake grumbled unhappily as we all stood and began walking towards the front door. This was really happening. It was getting closer and closer. I was moving out. I hugged each and every pack member, talking to them all one last time before I reached Charlie. By then I was pretty much bawling. "Hey Bells, wow, look at my little girl all grown up. I'm so proud of you. Promise to call and visit whenever you can, alright?" Charlie said, trying not to cry himself. "I will, Dad, promise," I said, smiling through the sadness. I gave him one last, tight hug before pulling away from him and backing into the large truck, full of Jasper and his belongings. I climbed into the back seat next to Jasper before buckling into my seat belt and squeezing Jasper's hand, trying to reassure myself. He leaned over and placed a quick kiss to my forehead before Peter began backing out the driveway. I spun to face the window, waving frantically at everyone, willing myself not to cry again. As we took off down the road, I imprinted the memory into my mind forever. My family and pack stood outside the large white house, smiling, waving, loving. We drove down the twisty roads of Forks before finally reaching the large sign at the exit. "Thank you for visiting Forks. Come back soon." I smiled as I looked out of the window once more. This was the start of a new life. The start of a new life full of adventure with the people I love. The start of forever.